So walk me through that, Dougie. Like someone asked you to officiate their wedding. Like what's your process from like being asked to the final product and like what you say on day of?
I don't know. I just try to get a little bit of a background on the bride and the groom, and I usually slip some jokes in there. Like I try to figure out what my target audience is, like who's going to be at the wedding, and I usually just slip some humor in there, some good old fashioned Indian humor, and lightens the mood pretty good.
Yeah.
So you're kind of like a part-time stand-up comedian, part-time, bucking horse guy, part-time wedding officiator, a little bit of everything. Sounds like.
Yeah, a little bit. I didn't plan on that, but it kind of turned out that way.
Where'd you grow up, Dougie?
I grew up in Browning, Montana, on the Blackfoot Indian Reservation.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
All right, so where Joe and I went, because he was telling you about that. We went and hung out with Steven for lunch at the Parkman Bar. I guess was Parkman, Wyoming?
Down by the Crow Res?
It was right on the border, right?
Yeah, I think Wyola is technically the closest town in Montana.
Oh.
From that bar. But it's like Sheridan, Wyola, in between those two places.
Mm-hmm.
So my question though was going to be: is that like the farthest south area of the Crow reservations, or was that? I don't even know which tribes or what, but where were we there, and then where are you in comparison to that?
They're like
your tribe.
They're like southeast Montana. I'm northwest, like northwest kind of.
Oh, okay.
Oh, you're up next to like Glacier.
Yeah, I mean, like right where I'm at, you could throw a rock in Glacier, and you can throw a rock in Canada.
Oh, okay.
Oh, dang.
Yeah, you've got a little Canada A in your accent, just a little bit.
Yeah, you can always tell when somebody's from Browning because they sound like the moose from Brother Bear.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm a dual citizen, so I spent some time as a kid in Winnipeg, Manitoba, and some out on Vancouver Island. So pardon me, but by the end of this thing, I sound a little bit more Canadian. I can't help it. Like we have a buddy, Luke Ferrari, up in Alberta, and we did a podcast with him, and by the end of it, I was like tripping over myself, sounding like a Canadian. So, but I love it. I love everybody up there in that part of the country.
For sure, it's a good place to be. Good coffee, Tim Hortons, and can't ask for much better place.
No kidding. So you've got Tim Hortons in Montana?
No, they got it just up in Canada. I'm not very far from the line. My future wife, she lives with me now, but she's from Merritt, British Columbia, so we go up there quite a bit.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's worth crossing the border for some Timmy time, I guess. People down here probably don't understand what's so great about Tim Hortons.
Yeah.
What is the big? I mean, I know it's donuts and coffee, but it's good donuts and coffee, right?
Yeah, good coffee, good donuts, and I don't know. One of the big things that I always get there is they call it a double. It's like a coffee with the perfect mixture of cream and sugar, and you don't got to add anything to it. You just say, "I want a double," and it comes ready to go.
Oh man, that sounds good.
Yeah.
That sounds real good. So, I guess let's go ahead and get into it. I know Joe probably has prepared a bunch for this as well, but I'd like to start out with kind of how you got into bucking horses, because I think that's how we both know you. We probably know other things about you too. We'll get into, but I'd be really curious. Just when you first, because I'm sure you've always loved horses. You seem like a guy that'd be kind of a dumb question to ask someone like you. Like, when did you first realize you liked horses? You're probably born riding, but when did you first get into bucking horses?
When I first got into bucking horses, I was probably I think I was right about 16 years old. I wanted to ride bucking horses, but my dad, he would never let me because I was like 90 pounds soaking wet. And he didn't want me to get hurt, and I wanted to do it. I wanted to do it. And finally, one day Dad was gone on a business trip and they were bucking horses in Browning, and I got a hold of my dad's younger brother, my uncle, and I told him they were bucking horses in town, and him and I kind of got the same philosophy. It's better to ask for forgiveness than it is for permission. So he took me to town, and I went and rode bucking horses, and got me addicted since then.
Yeah, that's good advice. I haven't done anything too great in my life yet, but most of them weren't things my parents advised me to do. It was stuff I had a really hard time telling them I was going to go do it, actually.
So was it? Do you still ride today? I think someone mentioned that you still ride a little bit, don't you?
Yeah, I took the year off just because I got so busy doing all this other stuff. But I'm not done by a long shot. But yeah, no, I'm still gonna ride. I'm not retired yet.
Okay, great. So then that first experience, like I know some people who in rodeo, especially the rough stock, it seems like if you don't get introduced to it the right way, you could get soured on it really quick, right?
Oh
If
yeah,
you're kind of introduced to the wrong situation, and you probably know that better than most people if you're dealing with, I guess, what you consider green bucking horses, right? So like it sounds like that situation, like what about that situation do you feel like set that up so you weren't some one of these guys at the like diner who's like, oh yeah, I got on a Bronc once, and then I was just like, I got soured on that really quick because I broke my wrist or did something or whatever.
I don't know, because me, the way I got started is they only gave me one old campaigner horse, like, you know what I mean, one that was just kind of a blooper.
Mm-hmm.
They gave me that one for the first one, and then after that, it was just straight tryouts. Like, and I I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying like like my generation or the ones before were any tougher, but they were definitely a different breed. You know what I mean? Like me, I got on a lot of tryouts. I got smashed and
Yeah.
kicked and flipped on and crashed into fences going 100 miles an hour. Um, I was just
Can you define what a tryout is?
a horse
'Cause
that's yeah, it's a bucking horse that's never seen, hardly ever been around people. It's never been bucked with a dummy. It's never hardly had anything done with it. You know what I mean? And they guys will bring them bring them to town, put them in a chute, and um, just have young guys get on them. And I was one of those guys that was dumb enough to keep doing it. Um, I, uh, I have a totally different outlook on it now that I'm older, because I mean, I didn't start, I guess, progressing in bronc riding until I started getting to an older age. And had I been introduced to what I think would be called the right way, you know, guys putting me on stuff that basically just high lopes across the arena and stuff that wasn't going to kill you in the chute, I think I would have been a lot further a lot sooner. Because you talk to those right boys, like I've even talked to them, and asked them, hey, did you guys get on like young stuff like tryouts and colts when you guys were younger? And all the right boys, they told me, no, heck no. Our dad wouldn't let us get on that kind of stuff. They got introduced to it by getting on stuff that they could learn on. And look at them now. They're the wolfiest family in the whole world of bronc riding. You know what I mean? They're legends at a very young age, and I think there's something to be said about that. Bringing people up the right way, kind of introducing them to it slowly,
Yeah.
and kind of babying them along until they're until they are woofy enough to, get on something that's like a red-eyed lion or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you're more worried about progressing instead of just surviving each trip.
Yeah, because I remember my first time getting on a bucking horse, they gave me one hopper, like one blooper the first time, like I said. And then after that, I mean, shoot, they were just trying to see what bucked. They just brought stuff out of the hills. And I remember I was standing there and I was in all this hand-me-down equipment. And I asked my uncle, I said, because I had guys telling me, like, lift on your reins, stay square, hold the pizza, turn your toes out. And they might as well have been speaking a foreign language. I didn't know what the heck they meant. You know what I mean? And then I remember I looked over at my uncle and I said, Uncle, I'm pretty nervous. What do I do? And he said, well, you try to stay on this. And he slapped that colt on the back and it flipped over and smashed my saddle. And then he said, and you try not to hit that. And he pointed at the dirt and he said, you try to make it look really cool in between.
Yeah.
That's
It seems more and more with the information age we're in, any skill or any sport people do, baby steps are a big deal, and that's preached more and more. We're back in the day with kind of luck of the draw and the toughest guy won. But in your case, you're there in that scenario with these really tough horses, and it sounds like some really great instruction. What was your motivation to keep doing that? Did you have an idol? Did you have like a guy you wanted to be as a bronc rider, or was it something to do? Like, what kept you going? Because I imagine in those, if you came up now and you wanted to bronc ride maybe, and you go to school or you go to a bronc riding school, and guys start you out like you were talking about the Wright brothers, there's kind of a path, and people are going to help you along. But if you did it the way it sounds like you started out, probably somebody who's not really serious about bronc riding might just kind of go, well, that was cool, and then go try something else next day.
Yeah. My idols were guys like Billy Etbauer and Dan Mortensen, and at home, my idol was my uncle Winslow. I mean, my dad's younger brother, because he's one of the greatest bronc riders to ever come from our part of the country, from our tribe. And I always remember you'd show up to the rodeo and you see those guys that were all Joe Cool, professional, had their shirts starched and, clean cut haircuts and always tucked in. And they just always looked pissed off, trying to be cool. And then my uncle Winslow would show up, and he'd show up to a rodeo. He'd be wearing Hawaiian trunks and a cut-off t-shirt and Crocs and a ball cap kind of cocked sideways. And he'd show up to the rodeo and go behind the chutes, and he'd get on all his cowboy gear on. He'd put his jeans on and stuff. His jeans were all tore up, and he'd put his cowboy shirt on. He'd never tuck it in. And he had one cowboy hat that he rode with most of his career. And he'd go behind the chutes, and I think it would piss a lot of those guys off, those Joe Cool acting guys, because they were trying so hard to be somebody, to be something. And my Uncle Winslow just showed up, and he already was somebody, in his own eyes. He didn't give a shit what those guys thought. And, he'd throw his gear bag down. All those guys would have their chaps were all nice and folded and shit. And everything was organized in their bag. And my Uncle Winslow, he had all his shit in a ball in his bag. And he'd show up and he'd get on and he'd draw the rankest horse there. He'd draw the biggest, rankest horse, and he'd make the prettiest bronc ride win. And as soon as he got done winning, he'd put on his ball cap and his Hawaiian trunks, and he was gone before the rodeo was even over. He always did it with a smile on his face too. So that's who I wanted to be.
That's cool. That's a pretty awesome like role model to have handy, like right there for you.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, cool.
Absolutely.
So with the riding and everything, did you grow up did you grow up on a ranch or just? I mean, I know said you grew up on the reservation, so you probably if you weren't on a ranch exactly, you were ranch adjacent, and you grew up riding horses and doing stuff, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could call it a ranch. We always had horses. We never had cows or nothing, but I had family members that had cattle. And so when I was a kid, I had no idea what it meant to be a cowboy. Like, I had no experience cowboying, doing that kind of stuff. My dad and uncle, they had horses, they had race horses. Um, they had an Indian relay team. And so, like, most of my summers when I was a little guy was spent going to fairs all over Montana and northern Wyoming and doing the Indian relay races. And when my dad and uncle would be out exercising the racehorses, they couldn't bring me with them all the time. So what they would do is they'd stick an old saddle horse in the corral and just leave me there with him. you know, that was my babysitter. And so I grew up knowing how to be a good Indian, but I didn't know how to be a cowboy until I got a little older.
Hmm. Can you expand on that a little bit? Like what do you mean you could be a good Indian but you had to learn about the cowboy part? You mean like a rodeo cowboy or?
Yeah, like I didn't I'd pushed cattle and stuff with my family when I was younger, but I had no idea anything about all of the I don't know if I should say cowboy, but how to be a stockman. You know what I mean?
Sure. Yeah. Sure.
How to read a cow, how to rope, how to do, just everything that entails being a good stockman with cows and horses.
Yeah.
Like, to be a good you could stick me on a horse and I could stay there, but
Yeah.
I didn't know how to be a stockman and a cowboy until I got older. When I got kind of close with my Uncle Mouse, that's kind of when I learned how to be um, a good stockman and cowboy.
Gotcha. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, was that something you felt like you had a need for at any point, or is it something you just had an interest and got into? Because I mean, clearly, you're saying you didn't have that in your life. Like when you met your Uncle Mouse, could you talk about that? I did watch that documentary that you were in that Ian made, and that was really cool. So I'm a little up to speed on who your uncle is. That's about it. But getting around him, is that an area where you started to recognize stockmanship for the first time, or was it before then?
Oh yeah. That's when I first started really understanding how to be a good stockman, because one of the things he told me was the only way to move horses and cattle fast is slow. And me being an Indian, I always wanted to run and being a kid, you're like a kid. Young kids are like bad dogs, always wanting to run and get things done fast, and they end up causing a wreck, and animals get out. And anyway, I was that was me. And then Mouse he put the finishing touches on me. He uh he taught me how to be a cowboy, how to be a stockman, and he he helped me out a lot, especially after my mother passed. My mom died when I was like 14, and I was always looking for a place to go and a place to be. And anyway, when I was about, I'd always known Mouse, but I didn't get close to him until I was like 20 or 21, and he helped finish raising me. And that's when I fell in love with the breeding side of the bucking horses, is when I got close to him.
What was he breeding bucking horses?
Yeah, he's bred bucking horses his whole life. I mean,
okay.
Way before I was, obviously way before I was born. and he's actually pretty famous for it. You know, I can hardly talk to anybody in the PRCA. The only reason they would, anybody would give me a time of day back when I was younger is they'd hear my last name, Hall, and they'd say, "Oh, do you know Mouse?" And I'd say, "Yeah, that's my uncle."
Mm.
They all knew him and his bloodline of bucking horses and stuff. So I thought that was pretty cool.
So how does a fella get a name like Mouse?
Well, he don't look like a mouse. He's a big 6'3" Indian. He's I think the story is when he was a baby, he ate the middle out of a piece of bread, and his sister started calling him Mouse. Like,
and that stuck?
and it stuck. Yeah.
Yeah, going. That's funny.
Wow.
That is like a good, like if you were like, yeah, there's this guy in northern Montana, like breeds bucking horses. Like that's a good name. Like Mouse Hall. That's a good kind of rodeo contractor type name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah. So so that's what was kind of the genesis of your deal then with because Good Medicine Bucking Horses, that's your company or contracting business or whatever you call it.
Yeah, that's me and my wife's company. Yeah.
Okay. Great. So yeah, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah. What all does that entail? Is that just the bucking horses, or because a minute ago you had kind of insinuated, you said all this stuff. So sounds like you're a busy man.
It's like, well, I started doing them videos on social media just to screw around, and it took off, and then somebody was like, "Hey, you should do some merchandise," and so I did, and that took off and turned into like a full-time job. And so the merchandise, and then I do speaking engagements all over the place, and then what else do I do? I started getting into the movie business, like doing stunts in movies, like whenever they need Indians and things like that.
Oh yeah,
yeah, doing that, and just kind of start having to wear a lot of hats recently in the last few years.
Yeah. Wow. Oh, that's pretty cool. Hey, well, let's back up to the social media thing for a minute, because that's a good place to start on some of this. It's interesting, the whole world of social media, is huge. But in the cowboy world, there are some people that have done quite well. And we've talked to a few of them. And it's interesting how a lot of times it was pretty unsuspecting. It wasn't something they thought was going to be a big deal. They just loved what they did every day, started posting it. Next thing you know, they've got a bunch of people looking forward to the next reel or post or whatever that comes out. So how did that get going for you? Were you pretty intentional about growing a social media following, or how did you get started at that?
No, I wasn't intentional about it at all. I was pretty, I guess, closed-minded about the whole thing. Like my profiles were all private and stuff. And then I ended up going down to a practice down at George Veter's ranch in California, and I met my good friend by the name of Meng Lee, who's his social media guy. And Meng told me, he said, I was visiting with your cousin Chase Brooks and Lori Leo Harver from Bronc Riding Nation, and we all agreed that you got a gift and you don't use it. And I said, what do you mean? They said, well, when you talk, people listen. And you got a story to tell. I said, well, how do I use it? He said, just start videoing yourself talking and post it on social media. And I said, well, what do I say? He said, well, just talk from your mind and your heart. And I told him, well, sometimes my mind and my heart cuss. And he said, just say it anyway. So I started doing it. It just took off like wildfire. It's been pretty fun.
Yeah. No, that's pretty cool. That's funny you say you weren't super, hip to the idea originally, because I remember, social media. I'm a bit younger than you even, but I can be kind of grumpy about things. Just ask Joe. And I remember social media, I thought it was the dumbest thing, I wished I had been born in the 1800s. And then, but more and more, you see how it can be useful. And heck, that's how I saw you for the first time. Put a big old smile on my face. Some of your videos are pretty funny and pretty inspiring. And like I like to read, I like Robert Kiyosaki quite a bit, and he talks about staying young and how you can get old and grumpy, but you've got to look at what the young people are doing and what's new and present. And it's no different, you know, if you were kind of a stickler, probably back in the day when the printing press first came out, you'd be sitting there huffing and guffing and thinking, what's this stupid printing press? You know, we should be writing with a quill pen. But then years later, there's some old crusty guy that only reads books made on a printing press, and he's huffing and guffing about social media. So eventually, it becomes the norm and it becomes useful. And so I think it's cool that, you know, that's a similar story I've heard is other people who weren't crazy about it, but started using it and found that it could be quite impactful and helpful for other people. And it's not such a big deal after all. So that's pretty neat how that came about for you. What did that kind of open up for you in your life doing that? Because I mean, it's one thing to get a bunch of eyes on you, but what did you notice about your life, and what did you think about that as it started to grow?
Well, first of all, people start reaching out to me, wanting me to come and speak to their schools or communities, and the school part kind of blew my mind because I kind of cuss in my videos. And
Well, okay, so kind of before, like before you get into that, I want to know, like those first however many, like 20 videos or whatever, how did you even get stuff to talk about? Because that was something Ben and I, like, we've done over 100 episodes of this podcast now, and we're not where we want to be, but we've improved quite a bit just in our ability to have conversations and kind of carry things. But man, in the beginning, it was really tough, at least for me, to sit down and be like, how are we going to fill an hour and a half? Because sometimes we'd even do it without a guest. And it's like, I don't feel like I have that much to say. So, can you talk about those early videos and like what your thought process was on what you wanted to share? I know that guy told you to say what's in your head and what's in your heart, but like do you remember the kind of those conversations you had with yourself about it?
yeah, I remember a lot of it was like, um, I think about something that I wanted to do, and you know, the kind of the backlash I got from society or from relatives or people that I knew. And you know, I think like, what would you tell yourself? Like, if you could go back in time, what would you say to yourself? So like, anytime I've ever said something on social media, it was always something that I needed to hear. And
Mm.
I went in with with the intention of messing up, because that's another thing Mang told me. He said, don't be afraid of um what people say or what they think, and just post it. Just post it, and whatever the feedback is, go off of the feedback. If it's positive, keep going with what you're doing. And if it's you know, if you get any negative, I mean, like a whole bunch of negative, because you're going to get negative feedback no matter what. Um, but if it's like a whole bunch of negative feedback, you know, maybe change something, you know, figure out what you got to change. Um, but that's what I did. I just started doing it and screwing up. And I looked at a couple of my first few videos, and I was pretty timid looking, but yeah, I just went in there with the intent to fail.
Yeah, yeah. That's the good attitude to have. Not that you're actively trying to fail, but when you kind of go into something and you're like, well, I'm probably not going to be good at this to start, right?
Yeah.
And you kind of just take the pressure off yourself. I do that a lot. It's not realistic, but like you're trying something new. It's like, well, you've never done it. Should you be good at this? Probably not. But for some reason, your brain can trick you into thinking you should be good at this for whatever reason, right? Because you've chosen to do it. So
Yeah.
yeah, giving yourself permission to fail, that just kind of like decompresses everything from the start, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it seems like also, when you're just getting going, you're pretty small, so most people don't criticize what you have to say. And by the time people do come around to criticizing what you have to say, it's probably because you're going somewhere, and it's more out of jealousy than out of their disagreement with what you have to say.
Yeah, for sure. I don't know. I mean, I've had a lot of people just out of jealousy just say and do things, but I don't know. That's life. If there's two ways to make change in this world: hand your money to the cashier or piss people off. So
Yeah. So in that situation, then how does the good medicine attitude respond to the hate or to the criticism, especially when you know it's out of jealousy?
I just don't go around those people anymore. I don't read comments ever. Like I never read my comments. Or if I do read my comments, I just look for uh, pictures and names of people that I know or that I know are influential, and like I might respond or like their comment because it's always positive. Um, but yeah, no, you just I don't know. I guess the best way I could describe it is I don't know if I'll get in trouble for this, but I put these earmuffs on.
Yeah, I see that. No, you're fine. Well, that's interesting. Now I'm going to ask you this because this podcast is great. It's like a case study, and I want to start asking people this question, especially people that have had, some success. You know how they say nobody. I don't know how it's phrased exactly, but you'll never get criticism from people that are better than you. In your experience, have you ever had someone that you looked up to that you considered better than yourself give you criticism? And I'm not talking about constructive criticism, but just kind of be down on you. Because people say that's kind of a law of nature. But I'd be curious. I want to start asking people that if that's true or not, because I think it is. But have you ever experienced, the idols you looked up to kind of saying things to you where you thought, damn, that hurt?
Nope.
That's good. I guess maybe if that happened, that would help you see through somebody who isn't who you thought they were in that case.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, the only people that have ever like done anything or said anything negative to me is always somebody that was either jealous and or somebody that struggled seeing themselves as somebody. You know what I'm saying? Like somebody that struggled with self-worth. And I think that just kind of comes out in jealousy. They don't see themselves the way they want to see themselves. They got a negative outlook on themselves, and it just comes out as hate towards somebody else. And um yeah, or I don't know. It's just way easier to be negative than it is to be positive in this world. And
Yeah.
oh, I lost him.
Because we have better things to talk about. But oh, can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can hear you now.
We can hear you.
Am I back?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I was just saying I don't want to keep hammering on negativity because we have better things to talk about. But it is a good thing. People struggle with that, right? And I mean, have you experienced that? Like as you started getting more successful, is it something you dealt with? And also, it's one thing to just tell yourself, it's not important what other people think. I have confidence in what I'm doing. I'm okay. I'm going to keep going. You can tell yourself that, but people's words stick with you, and you have to learn to deal with that. So is that something you dealt with, and how did you deal with that? Because like I said, it's one thing to shut off the voice or just not listen to what people have to say. But it's another thing to really like leave those words behind you and not let it kind of haunt you.
Yeah, I did a lot of, I guess, what would you call it, soul searching, and I did a lot of homework on myself. And one thing tell myself to do anytime somebody shoots negativity at me or tries to get down on me is, you know, I look at it and I say, well, what's this person doing with their life? You know, what has this person done with their life? Does this person, are they doing what I want to do? Have they done what I want to do? You know, who are they rubbing shoulders with? You know, like, is this, do I really want to end up like this human being? And if the answer is no, then I just turn a deaf ear on them. And yeah, I'll be upset for a little while, but it always makes me feel better that, you know, like my Uncle Mouse always told me, you're only as good as the company you keep. So if you hang out with 5 champions, you're going to be the 6th. And you hang out with 5 professionals, you're going to be the 6th. And you hang out with 5 meatheads, and you're going to be the 6th. And the guys that the people that always ever shot negativity at me are the people that hung around with meatheads. You know what I mean?
That's good advice. That's really good advice.
Yeah.
And I've heard that a lot, but I don't know. I feel like almost as you get older and you can you can see people or peers or whatever, you can see how it's all progressed, right? Especially when you're young, it's like, well, yeah, of course I want to do this or hang out with these guys. And even though there might be that little voice in the back of your head, you're like, no, this is what I'm doing. This is what the crowd's doing. This is what everyone's telling me to do. But then you get almost like a longer runway on the whole deal, and you're like, oh, you look back and you're like, yeah, that was the point where I ended up being able to go this direction, and that guy is still kind of in the same spot over there.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. That's happened to me a few times. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you say you're doing homework on yourself, like what does that look like for you? Is that like meditation? Is that like any sort of spiritual stuff for you? Like what do you feel like you do? You know, maybe it's just sitting and reflecting. What do you feel like you do to kind of start to know yourself better?
Kind of like just sitting and reflecting and praying about it, asking for guidance, and then reading. You know, like I've read you know, like you guys mentioned earlier, Robert Kiyosaki. I read his book, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I just start reading these books about like self development and things like that. And anytime I was in a hard spot or whatever, or I needed, you know, guidance, or I was pretty desperate, you know, I think that's when Creator or God, whatever you want to call him, is finds opportunity to come into your life is when your back's up against the wall. You know what I mean? And anyway, but yeah, no, I read a lot of books and figured out, you know, what I wanted to do and what I wanted to be, and I just said no to anything that wasn't that.
Yeah.
That's simple, right?
It's simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of things in life like that, right? Where it's like, no, I understand that concept. Can't guarantee I'll execute it, but I understand that concept.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think for sure God can do a lot more with you when your soft belly is skyward than your hard shell, you know. And but it kind of goes back to what you were saying about your Uncle Mouse was saying, you know, you got to learn to be slow to get things done fast. You know, a lot of those same things. And like Joe said about what you said a minute ago about, you know, people in your life and recognizing who your friends are. There's so many of these little sayings, and you hear them over and over and over again. And, you know, some people will say, oh, I've heard that. That's cliche, whatever. But a lot of times you will hear the same thing, or at least from what I'm finding in life, you do hear the same thing over and over and over again. And it's good because we forget a lot of stuff. And so you'll hear the same thing over again, and you can either have a proud heart and say, "Oh, I've heard that," or you hear it and you go, "Huh, I've heard that before. Oh, I forgot that. Oh yeah, let me look around. Oh, I do have some friends that maybe I don't need to be hanging out with, or just whatever it is." I think a lot of it has to do with your approach to the information, because it's same with the books, right? You tell someone what you're reading and they'll go, "Oh, don't read that. That's just go to work. Don't read a self-help book." And I'm sure there's some bad self-help books, but for the most part, if you read it thinking I'm an idiot and I need to learn and I need help, you'll find something in there and you'll be better for it, even if it's just your expansion of the English language at the very least. So, when did you first start reading? Is that something you did as a kid?
I mean, I didn't really enjoy reading as a kid, but I guess this was probably like maybe 4 or 5 years ago, before all the social media and everything started, I started reading books like, what was it, The Science of Getting Rich? I read that. What else did I read? I watched The Secret, and I got one of them books on The Secret. And what else did I read? Rich Dad Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Read that one, and I don't know. They all really helped shape me into who I am today. Like, I wouldn't have any of this stuff, or I wouldn't be talking to you guys if I hadn't to read any of those things. And one thing that really stuck with me, I can't remember which one of them said it, but about a competition mindset. The competition is good. Some competition is good, but there's always something kind of negative about it, like beating somebody to get something. And people need to realize that there's enough gold out there for everybody, and if you just focus on creating rather than taking, then I think creator will take you a heck of a lot further. And that's one of the things that helped me out.
Hmm. So at the time that you first started reading those books, what was your reason for doing that? Were you in a bad situation, or did the books kind of find you, or did you go in search of something that you were looking for?
I went in search of them for something that I was looking for. I was kind of at a tough spot in my life. I was broke and I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And so I thought about it, and I thought, well, shoot, the only place to go when you're at rock bottom is you can either stay there and lay there and bleed, or you could start climbing. And I thought, well, how am I going to start climbing? Well, I need to get educated, a little more educated than I am. And I start reading those books, and I started listening to Steve Harvey a lot too. And Steve Harvey talked about everybody having a gift, and that your gift is the thing you do the absolute best with the least amount of effort. And that when you learn how to use your gift, it's going to make room for you. And I start really meditating on that. And next thing, I added two and two together, and I was like, wait, shoot, I'm pretty good at talking. And anyway, so I just started using my gift, I guess, my gift to gab.
That it's funny you say that, actually, because I don't advertise this to a ton of people, not because it's super personal, but just because I think it's kind of goofy. But honestly, probably one of the people that I don't know who's had the biggest impact in my life is Steve Harvey.
Mm-hmm.
Like, which is funny because most people know him as the comedian or like the goofy Family Feud guy.
Yeah.
But no, I'm totally with you on that. Like, talk about a guy who will really make you get introspective and think about yourself, and and make you feel like you've got a purpose on this planet. Like, Steve's really good at that. and I've hit a couple low points in my life, and I didn't come out the other end solely because of Steve Harvey, but he was definitely a catalyst for kind of getting me thinking about the right things, which is, like I said, it's still kind of funny to say because he's, Kings of Comedy, Family Feud, that guy also. But yeah, he, in my experience, he gives people very good life advice. He's an excellent speaker.
That's for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, Joe, I think if you weren't wanting to share that with a lot of people, you just shared it with probably the most amount of people you can. So
yeah,
just putting that
there
out there.
It's out there now.
But
I mean,
I'm sure you helped a lot of folks, right?
Yeah.
Maybe that was your little sales point. Make it sound like a secret and then put it out there.
Yeah.
So now I forget my train of thought where I was going, because I was going to ask, that was a really good question. I was going to ask Dougie something at the same time about, we were talking about books. Now I got to backtrack. Well, if you have something to ask him, go ahead.
Yeah, okay.
I will rethink of it.
So let's segue here a little bit, because you definitely seem like a guy who's kind of got a lot of synergy in his life, right? So go ahead. What's up?
Well, I don't want to derail you, and I'll remember what you said, but I remember what it was. I was going to ask Dougie. He was talking about all that stuff, but I was wondering if that was before or after college, when you had, when you're at kind of a tough point. Because did you go to Montana State?
Montana Western in Dillon.
Montana Western.
Yeah.
Okay. But I don't know why I was going to ask you that, and I shouldn't have derailed you, Joe. I was kind of having a Theo Vaughn moment there, and I just totally blanked out. So,
you're good.
Anyway, back to the synergy.
Well, okay, so just knowing you through Instagram a little bit and then hearing you talk, it sounds like now you got a lot of irons in the fire, but it all kind of feeds off itself, right? So like the bucking horses, the talking on Instagram, the YouTube channel, the merchandise, like it kind of like snowballs a little bit, right? Because you're one of those guys who, like, the brand is Dougie Hall. Like, I know it's good medicine bucking horses, and it's important to have a good partner in life, which I'm sure you do if you're having this kind of success. But like, that's part of it, is that there's a lot of synergy from what it seems like. So I know you said the first step when you were kind of at that point where you're like, I'm broke, I'm not sure really where I'm going to go in life. Like, after you got the education, what was the first, like, rubber meeting the road? Were you like, I'm going to be a bucking horse guy and I'm going to, like, buy this mare or something? Or like, how did you get from that point on the, maybe like the bucking horse side of things? Because it sounds like that came like, and correct me if I'm wrong on the order, but it's like the bucking horses, then the Instagram, then the speaking, then the merchandise, and it's kind of built on itself, right? So can you talk about that process? Because I'm always curious. I'm very, like, practically minded. I really appreciate when people talk about, like, well, this is the mindset you got to have and you got to do that. But also I think it's important to hear about, like, well, what did you actually do? Like, what were the physical things you did to get from that point to closer to where you want to be?
Yeah, well, what I did was I got close to my Uncle Mouse when I was like 21, and what he did is he owned a trail riding business. So he gave me a job as a guide, taking tourists up to the edge of Glacier Park on horseback. And so I'd show up every morning about 7 a.m. I'd go and gather all the trail horses, and by the time I got them in, the other guides would be showing up, and they would start saddling and graining horses and things like that. And Mouse would wave me into his office. I'd go in there, and he'd tell me bucking horse stories, and we'd drink coffee, and he'd tell me about, stories about my grandpa Cap, my dad's dad, because my grandpa Cap and Mouse were raised like brothers. They're first cousins, but raised like brothers. And anyway, finally I realized, shoot, Mouse is damn near 80. And so I asked him one day, what's your plans with your bucking horses? And he said, going to hospitals now instead of rodeos. What do you got in mind? And I told him, well, I watched you since I was this big. Build a horse in your mind. Go and put that mare and that stud together to make that thought. And then once that thought hit the ground, I watched you take it to the national finals rodeo in Las Vegas. I can't let that go. Will you sell me some? And he agreed to sell me some horses. And about that time, what's the name? My dad, I'd had some money saved up, and my dad, and I want to start this off. My dad's done so much for me. My dad's taught me a lot, but he's always really practical, and just out of being a good father, wanting me to survive and be able to feed myself. Well, he approached me and he said, I'd like you to consider taking that money that you got saved up and investing it into a trucking company. Getting I can't remember how much it. He wanted me to invest either all of it or most of it into this trucking company, and I said, I don't want to be a trucker. He said, well, you got to feed yourself somehow, and what are you gonna do? And I was like, bucking horses.
Yeah.
And
Rodeo, right? That's always the great answer for a parent.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not suggesting that everybody do that because, bucking horses, you don't make money on bucking horses. Like, you'd be lucky if you break even. You can make money on them, like, after, you get a good reputation established and bloodlines, and, you sell them for a pretty good chunk of change. But that wasn't the smartest decision. And but it was the best decision because, if there's one thing I learned from Mouse, it was how to press max bet and how to press max bet on yourself. And that's what I did. And if I wouldn't have done that, none of this would have even happened. I wouldn't have done any of this stuff if I hadn't have done what I did. It was pretty scary because, I went broke for a little while, but, I ended up figuring out how to make some money and things ended up working out. And if I wouldn't have done that, I'd probably be trucking or working for somebody else doing something. And not saying there's anything wrong with that, but that's just not what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Well, in my opinion, because I have a lot of friends that are kind of in similar situations, and that like betting on yourself thing that people struggle with and whether to do it and whether not to do it. But, you said yourself, you wouldn't recommend everyone go and like the bucking horse route, right? but it's one of those deals where, yeah, it might not be a very high percentage thing, but if the right person has the correct amount of passion, like they're going to make it work, right? So maybe I could be wrong, but like let's say long term, Dougie Hall really cares about bucking horses, is super invested in bucking horses. Like, man, you're going to put way more blood, sweat, and tears into something like that than you would a trucking company. Like, even if you were raised right and had a good work ethic, you're just not going to live and breathe the thing like you would if you really care about it. And so that's why I feel like there are things in life where it's like, hey, maybe you shouldn't do that. I mean, gosh, Ben and I, like, I ride horses for the public. So, like, that's not exactly a giant money earner, right? But I really enjoy what I do, and I'm trying to, like, grow my business. And I'm the same way. I would not recommend people, like, if you're in it for the money, don't go do it. But there's nothing I could do that I would be more passionate about doing than what I do right here. And so, one, there's a quality of life aspect, but two, I don't know that I would work as hard at anything else in life as like what I do right now. And I feel like that's the case for a lot of people because someone's like, oh, well, 99 out of 100 people, you could lose your ass in the bucking horse world. It's like, yeah, you could. But if you're the right person and it's the right fit and it lines up, maybe you could be that guy who's taking a string to the NFR every year and stuff like that. And so to me, it just seems like your passion and your gift have to fit that pipeline of whatever you're pursuing. And if it does, the chances of it all working out are astronomically higher.
Yeah, that's for sure. I don't know, like I've been around a lot of people in my short 31 years on this earth, and I've seen people that have like worked and done things that they didn't enjoy, and they got a lot of money to do it. But I mean, their life expectancy, they a lot of them didn't live very long. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like, and I've seen people have so much money, more than they, could even spend themselves, and just be so miserable. And, I'm not saying money's not important, because I highly recommend it, but, it's not everything. Money doesn't fix things. It, it helps, but it don't fix things. And I think if a
Mm-hmm.
person stays true to who they are, I think that's more important than any amount of money.
So
Yeah.
I didn't mean to derail the train of thought, but so you ended up, I guess you ended up not buying into the trucking company.
No.
Okay. And you started out with a couple of mares from your uncle?
Yeah, started out with a set of mares and a stud, and eventually got more mares and another stud, and then started, just took a gamble and took this select set of mares, bred them to this stud, and this other set of mares, bred them to this stud. And I just watched to see what would happen. And if I didn't like a mix, or if the colts didn't buck or whatever, I just switched them to a different stud. And some mares mixed really good with a certain stud. Some mares just didn't mix at all. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it took a long time to do, but we're finally starting to get somewhere with it.
And I don't know anything about bucking horses. What are you looking for when, like, you're talking about building this horse in your mind? What does that horse look like, and how does that horse act?
So, like, the way I look at it is, obviously you want them to buck, kick every jump, get up off the ground. And but to me, the way Mouse taught me is, you take, say like a 1,500 pound, say you got a 1,500 pound bucking horse mare. She's well bred, got good bloodlines. She what made that horse, and she bucks, or that bloodline bucks. And she's like 1,500 pounds, big old mare. And so a mare like that, you could breed it to a stud that's around the same size, but the genetics of the draft are going to be more prevalent, and you're probably going to end up with something that's pretty cold-blooded and big and lazy. And so what you'd want to do is breed that 1,500 pound mare, bucking horse mare, to a more thoroughbredy looking built bucking horse stud, and that'll give you a good happy medium, a good athlete. So that's what I try to do.
With these deals, when you're talking about lines and stuff, I mean, is there like a bucking horse registry?
Yep.
Because, like, I'm imagining, like, you get on AQHA website, right, and see somebody's papers. How are you knowing the lines of these horses?
There's a bucking horse registry. I've only got 2 horses registered in it right now. It kind of costs quite a bit of money to get a horse registered.
Mm-hmm.
But me, what I do is when I brand them colts, I brand them with the first or with the last number of the year they were born, and then I brand them with the first letter of their dad's name. And then I brand them with whatever number their mother is. So like I have my mares all listed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and so on. And so after that dad's letter brand, I do the mom's number.
Gotcha.
And that's how I keep track of them. And if it's a mix that I like, I'll keep that mix going. And if it's a mix I didn't like, I'll switch that mare to a different stud. Just that's what I do. That's what I was taught by. There's 3 guys that taught me how to raise bucking horses. There's Mouse Hall, Jake Hayworth, and Sparky Dreesen. And Sparky Dreesen's with J Bar J Rodeo, so I kind of took the things I learned from all 3 of those men and blended it into my own program, and it's been turning out pretty good for me.
Cool. And so from there, I guess just the herds getting bigger and bigger, and like with bucking horses, are you making money? Like, is the end goal to sell the horses? Is the end goal to like have the horses go to rodeos and you get paid that way for like use of the horse? What's kind of the end goal in terms of making money after the colt hits the ground?
My end goal is to sell like the A plus stringers, like the high dollar, like NFR type horses. Is to sell those ones and just keep my uncle and my aunt's bucking horse bloodline going. Obviously knowing that people sold bucking horses for a lot of money kind of was pretty appealing to me, but I was more just passionate about it, wanting to keep the bloodline going. So, shoot, I haven't even sold a bucking horse yet. Or actually, no, I have, but it was kind of a mediocre one. But
Gotcha.
My goal is to just sell a few A stringers here and there for a good chunk of change and just keep my uncle and my aunt's bloodline going.
Yeah. Good.
Hey, can you guys hear me and see me all right?
Yeah.
So from there, you're breeding the horses, and then, are you good?
Hey,
I know Ben's
Joe.
trying to come. Yeah, I can hear you.
You can? Okay. I just wanted to test that before we got too deep in this because I had to leave for a minute and come back.
Okay. Right now, for me, there's
if we were synced up or not.
There's 2 of you on the screen, but
oh, geez,
it's not a big deal. I can. Can you? Are you good, Dougie? You can still hear him?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Is there still 2 of me?
There is, like, one is black and one has your actual picture.
Okay, I think we'll be all right.
Yeah, I think we're good. I'm back to normal now. Okay.
Proceed.
One other big bucking horse question I had, if and this might be really open-ended. Like, I didn't realize until actually Stephen Yellowtail told me to ask about it. Like, there's quite a bit of training involved in these horses, or at the very least, training at all. Because me not being a rodeo guy, I would have thought probably the biggest thing with the bucking horses is like genetics, and then it's almost like cattle. It's like you get the genetics in place, and then you let them go do their thing. But that's not the case, right?
No. I think the biggest thing is getting them gentle in the bucking chute. So, because my Uncle Mouse told me you can have the most well-bred bucking horse in the entire world, but if it cripples itself or hurts somebody in the chute, then it ain't worth a shit. You know what I mean? And so what I do is when they're young, I get them to where they're going in and out of the chute, and I'll even grain them in the bucking chute and get them to where, you know, I put a rope around them where the cinch goes and get them to, you know, feel what it's like to like have somebody being around them and putting saddles on them and things like that. And desensitizing a lot like you would a saddle horse colt. There's a lot that goes into it, and
Can you kind of walk us through? So that was a good start there, like with the colt, like in terms of where in their life you might start bucking them or put a rider on, and like what does that progression look like? In say like one of these like A+ string horses, like what would a career look like starting as a colt someone's graining in the bucking chute?
So it would start out like in my program. It'd start out as a weanling, getting desensitized in a bucking chute, letting it know it's a good place. And sometimes like I won't even grain them in the bucking chute yet because they're so kind of skittish and afraid. I don't want them to hurt themselves. And if a horse is so scared, they won't even try to eat grain. So I'll just get them to where they're used to being sorted and used to being around me and other humans, and get them to where I can load them in a bucking chute nice and slow. And I'll just let them stand there. And as soon as they settle in there, I let them out. As soon as they quit moving and quit shuddering and stuff, I let them out. And pretty soon they get to where they can eat some grain in there and stuff. And I usually will buck them with a dummy, a quick release dummy, when they're like a year and a half. And I'll leave that on them for about 6 seconds. And what that does, it shows me what that horse is going to do with something on its back and with a cinch and a flank in it. And, you know, sometimes, usually if you work with them pretty good like that, they won't turn over on the dummy, but sometimes they'll turn over on the dummy. And if they do, that's not a horse I'm going to put into rodeos because I don't want to hurt or kill anybody. You know what I mean? But yeah, I'll buck them when they're like a year and a half or a year with a dummy. And then when they're 2.5, I'll do it again. And when they're 3.5, I'll do it again with the dummy, just once a year. And then by the time they're 4, they're ready for a rider. It's a long.
So yeah, I'm pretty uneducated on the bucking horse thing as well. But when you're training them, are you looking for a specific bucking trait in the horse, obviously besides them flipping over, or do you just want them to buck as hard as possible, and you're trying to promote that?
What I'm looking for is something that's getting up off the ground and kicking out with its back legs. That's what I'm looking for. So let's see. How can I describe it? Usually, if a horse goes out there and just does what they call a wild horse fit, that's probably not going to be a bucking horse because they're going out there like a kid throwing a tantrum, and they're just kind of jumping up real empty in the air and squealing, and it looks really showy and kind of cool, but that's not what you want. So what I'm looking for, I'm not even really looking for them to like really get after it the first time they buck with a dummy. I just want to make sure that they can keep their feet, that they can stay on their, you know, right side up and on all fours. So that I know that they're more likely to be safe for a rider.
So this is probably kind of a dumb question, but are you able to tell if a horse is going to be a good bucking horse without ever seeing it buck, but just by looking at its, you know, makeup and genetics and maybe knowing where it came from?
There's some guys that say you could, like if they say if you see one that kind of acts proud and it's that prances around and it's really proud, kind of really light on its feet, that one's more likely going to buck than not. But you know, to me, I don't think you really know until you know. And it's like it's like playing Keno, you know what I mean? You can hit all these different buttons, but you know, you ain't gonna know which one's hit until you hit the play button.
Hmm. So when it comes to buying stock, and maybe you don't ever really buy horses, but if you did buy horses, it sounds like you need to see them in action before you know if they're going to be any good or not.
Yeah, you need to see them in action. Or me, I've bought horses just knowing the bloodlines behind them. I've bought horses like that before, and that's worked out, and it's also not worked out too. You know.
Yeah, I'm sure. So as far as just in a nutshell, you don't have to get way into it, but on the money end, when it comes to the profit from a bucking horse business, how is that structured? And I'm assuming that you're not selling bucking horses, but you're taking them and running them at the rodeos. Is that correct? Or where is the major money made in this type of business?
The major money in bucking horse business is made when you sell them. So, like a stock contractor doesn't really make any money at all. A stock contractor is somebody that is usually a good business person, and they're a business person that loves horses, and they got extra money to spend to be a stock contractor. Stock contracting is an expensive hobby. You're lucky if you break even. But the way to make money with bucking horses is to have good bloodlines, be a good stockman, know how to build a bucking horse, and you sell those horses to those guys because they're always looking.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you prove those horses, though? Like if you have one for sale, how much experience does it need to have before you can market it at a good price and they're going to buy it?
So me, what I did, I partnered up with a pro rodeo company by the name of Ace's Wild Pro Rodeo. And so I'm able to take my horses. I'm actually on their card. I'm able to take my horses to pro rodeos and get them bucked and prove those horses and season those horses and build a reputation behind them. And the main thing now is in this new day and age, you gotta have videos. You gotta use technology. You gotta video those horses. And, so many guys will, say, I got this good bucking horse and this and that and show a picture, but, you don't have any proof. You gotta have proof. And the way to have proof is to have videos on that horse. And a lot of guys won't do that still to this day and age, but yeah, I don't know. You got to keep up with the times, like how you were saying with the printing press and then the internet and things like that.
Yeah. It can be hijacked, but it is the tool, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah.
That's very interesting.
I have one question about taking those horses to the rodeos. Because rodeo is kind of famous for, like, if you're going to be in that industry, you got to be a bit of a road warrior.
Yeah.
And so there's all these conversations. Like I've heard a lot of like timed events guys talk about it, right? Where like how you haul your horse and being hard on your horses, and like kind of the husbandry and the stockmanship that goes behind just getting these horses from A to B and then getting them to perform. Is that something like folks on the rough stock side? Like, is that something you have to consider if you're going around to pro rodeos? Like, how am I going to get this horse 12 hours away, and haul it however far, and then hope that it performs at its best? Is that something that's kind of prevalent in that industry, or has it not really been an issue for you? Like, how do you approach that?
I approach it by being a good stockman. So, like, remember I was talking about getting them horses used to being sorted and loaded on the trailer and all that when they're babies.
Mm-hmm.
So that translates to when they're bigger and they're ready to be bucked. And a lot of it's just in how you handle them. And So a horse that's been, knows how to be handled and stuff, loads on the trailer nice and easy. That horse is probably going to perform 10 times better than the one that's, digging a trench in the ground because it's so nervous running back and forth. And
Yeah.
so just being a good stockman, good animal husbandry, and grain too. Grain helps.
Yeah.
Yeah. I grain the shit
Yeah.
out of my horses when I'm going to take them to go buck.
Yeah,
There
nothing
you go.
wrong with that.
Yeah.
One of my favorite sayings when it comes to grain, the horseman Ray Hunt, who was, one of the fathers of horsemanship and all that, he had a saying that nothing shortens the distance between man and horse like a bucket of feed.
Yeah.
And you'll get these horsemanship people all nuts about, whistling to their horse or having him where he likes him so much they come running over. When hey, you can just bring a bucket of feed; they'll be there every time. And I know it made my life a lot easier when I quit worrying about, trying to go catch them perfect every time and just using feed or graining them before I ride them. Giving them a little routine made a big difference. Well, let's segue again. We have time left because I'm really interested in talking with you about the speaking that you do. But first of all, how did you get into that? So I know earlier you talked about, your friend recommended getting on social media, doing some stuff, made videos, you got eyes on you. People started reaching out to you. What was that like at first? Who was it that reached out to you, and what did they want you to come speak about, and where?
The first one that reached out, I think it was a school over in South Dakota, with a pretty huge native population, and what they, I think what they really liked about me and what they wanted me to speak on and touch on, speak about was, you know, um, what it's like growing up on a reservation and the struggles that go along with that, and how I got through those struggles and went and did something with my life because, like I said, my mother was killed when I was 14. I was actually, we were hit by a drunk driver. I was in the wreck, and how I was able to go through that and witness that and, um, you know, make something positive out of myself rather than go the other route and, go down a negative path. How, I think that's what they really like about me and what they really want me to touch on when I go and speak.
So, because I want to ask you, what's the problem? I guess, which is a pretty broad question, but I want to preface that with, I've done some research, and you can read old stories and things, and back in the olden days, um, when the Europeans were heading west and fighting with the Indians, and that was going on. And there's many accounts where, Europeans or white folks were taken by Indians and raised, especially from a young age. And years later, when their rescuers, came, they didn't want to leave. They loved the Indian way of life. And then vice versa, you had, Indians who were taken and raised in so-called, cultured civilization. And when they grew up, the first chance they got, or if they were exposed to their people, they left and went back to that, And just talking with Steve and Yellowtail, and now hanging out with you and some of the other guys that I've had the privilege to meet, you guys are awesome, and you have such a, I don't know, there's a cool spirit about you, and I can see, not even having gone back to the 1800s or before that or after that, I can see why somebody would have wanted to join a tribe, because there's a sense of community, and you guys are real giving, and there's a love of the land. And I mean, I guess if you're not into those things, maybe it's not your deal. But to me, there is something there that I could see would draw somebody versus just, mud and industrialism and top-down tyranny and whatnot. But it seems like today, you hear about reservations being a tough place for kids to grow up, or maybe a tough place for opportunity and all those types of things. So I'm curious, actually talking to you, not just hearing random news and stories, but talking to you, what are your thoughts on, why that is, why it would be tough today, and what the problems are, for a young person growing up on a reservation today in America?
I think I don't know the complete answer to that, but I could tell you my viewpoint is a lot of it's generational trauma. You guys ever heard about that?
Mm-hmm.
Not really.
So, like, say, like back when Europeans and Indians first met, you know, there was a lot of really not nice things that were done to the Indians. They got put on reservations and starved and given blankets with smallpox in them. Just a lot of really horrible things were done to them. And they were introduced to alcohol. And the way I see it is, or the way that I've been taught, is alcoholism is an allergy of the body and an obsession of the mind. And Europeans, in my opinion, people were just like horses. There's different breeds, but we're all horses. There's different breeds, there's different, whatever, but we're all humans. And the Europeans were exposed to alcohol for way longer than American Indians ever were. American Indians didn't have processed foods and sugars and starches and things like that. And so when the Europeans came over, there was a lot of things that our bodies weren't used to because we were a different breed of horse. So you introduce us to sugar and to processed foods and to starches. That's why Indians are more susceptible to getting like diabetes and like high cholesterol and things like that, because we're not used to that kind of stuff. I can't eat like a European. I gotta watch my diet because I'll my body does, it's foreign to my body still. And another one of the things that is foreign to an American Indian's body is alcohol. And I think that's why a lot of Indians get addicted to it, that they've gotten addicted to it. And not all of them, but a lot of them. And so, say like back in the old days, you got an American Indian that got all these horrible things happen to them, and they get introduced to alcohol. Well, they start coping with all that trauma by drinking, and then that person has kids, and they see what mom and dad did, or what dad did, or what mom did, whatever, and so they start doing the same thing. They start drinking, and it just goes on and on and on. And now you got this generation. And so I think a lot of it stems from what happened back in the day. And because honestly, it wasn't that long ago. It was just like, what, 2-3 grandpas ago that all that stuff happened. Pretty recent. And I think that's I don't think that's the whole answer, but I think that's part of the answer.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think, you're talking about generational trauma, and I haven't heard about it in those exact terms. I'm sure there's some of that even in Appalachia. You have folks that came over escaping poverty or wars or whatnot in Europe, and then went right to work, almost like slaves in the mines. And then, that was only, 50 to 80 years ago, where those jobs became either obsolete or less difficult. You can drive a machine or something now. And so you've got people there even who, they have no hope. And they're just, like you said, I like the way you said that, they just do what their parents did. So and it gets passed down that way. And that might not be the only way, but that definitely seems like that's a major trait. Is that, if your great grandpa escaped a war and poverty, then his son was a miner, and his son was a miner, and his son, was locked up, and then his son was a miner again or whatever, and then now the kid that's all he knows. And I guess same for the Indians. So that generational trauma, how is the knowledge of that, helped you craft your message to the kids that you speak to and try to help?
Just knowing that, shoot, like I said, we're no different than horses. That those colts or whatever, they don't know. They don't know what they don't know, and they only know what they know, what they've been exposed to. And so, just, I guess, showing them that, hey, I, cut from pretty much the same cloth as you, and this is how I got through it. And hopefully by sharing my story with them, they're able to sort of build a survival guide or a roadmap to, I guess, a better life. And I'm not saying that every one of them is going to do it, or that I'm the best example or whatever, but that's what saved my life, was somebody being brave enough to share their story with me. And knowing about that generational trauma, and I think that helps out quite a bit.
Yeah, because it's one thing to point out somebody's problem, right? But it's another thing to point out somebody's problem and present it in a way that they want to make a difference in their life.
Yeah, for sure.
That's got to be difficult. Was that, public speaking, was that something totally foreign to you? Because I know you had been doing some social media stuff, but that's still not the same. Just turning on a camera versus being, in public, giving a talk. Was that something you had to kind of rev up for?
Yeah, I had to screw up quite a bit. It was no different than doing social media stuff or riding bucking horses. I had to get bucked off quite a bit, and and I still get bucked off doing that. And I still make mistakes, but I think that's part of it. You learn, and I've gotten to where I don't know if I'd say I'm like one of the the greatest at it, but I'm definitely a lot better than I used to be. And like one time I screwed up because I was talking to a school, like I was talking from I was talking from like elementary kids, like little kids, all the way up, and there was like high school kids, like seniors. And I was talking to this school, and I was talking about, you're gonna have people shooting negativity at you and telling you how you can't do something and how something's impossible. And I was telling those kids, like in the message, that, don't let those people put their fears onto you. They're just saying that because they can't see themselves doing it. And I said, when people start shooting negativity at you, you just put these on. And I stuck. And like I didn't realize it until after I did it. And there's like a bunch of elementary kids, and I'm like, oh shit! Like I probably shouldn't have done that, but
yeah. Man, have you thought of marketing that somehow? You could make like a ball cap with little flip down flaps,
yeah,
or something.
Just make real
that's
earmuffs.
Really funny. Yeah, real earmuffs.
Yeah.
No, I haven't thought about that, but that might be that's something I'll probably have to look into.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be pretty funny.
We won't even make the royalties on that too high for you either.
Yeah.
For giving you the idea.
Yeah, for sure.
Oh man. So, as we're wrapping up here, I guess the last thing I wanted to talk about. Well, I really appreciate what you said about the generational trauma, and from just hearing you talk, it seems like, hearing people's stories, but like in a broader stroke, like education seems like a big part of solving that. Just from like what you've talked about with your own personal experience, educating people that there are alternatives, educating people that you can do this or you can do that. Because yeah, I mean, I don't have a lot of experience with natives, but I've definitely been around groups of people that have that generational trauma, and yeah, it's tough when someone doesn't really see it. It's almost like they have a predetermined life, right? And the only thing you can do is cope with that predetermination. You have no control. And so getting educated on ways to have that control um, seems to me it's about like the only way you can break that cycle.
Yeah, for sure. And I think another big thing is realizing, you can't control people, places, or things. You can only control yourself. And help is for people that want it, not for people who need it.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah. I think that goes back to what we talked about at the beginning of the podcast about looking out for who you're around. Because I think it's easy, and I've fallen into this, it's easy to think you are the people that you're around. And realizing that, yes, if you're around these people, you will be like this, but you can change that. It's not written in stone. I think a lot of people struggle with that all across the board. That they look around them, they look at the people around them, and they think, oh, this is my future. Or even in their business. We talk about, Joe and I talk about it a lot, just horse trainers, like small time horse trainers. They look at all the other guys. They're like, well, yes, this is our life. We're just going to be broke and get hurt young and kind of have a miserable life, but it's fun because we love horses and that's it. And that's because that's the guys they're looking at. They don't look at the guy who had a little bit more of an exciting life and became a little bit better trainer and, just did better, looked up, learned things, read books, whatnot. And so it's easy to fall into that. And in a way, everybody could almost start their own little, in their own little life, they can start their own little trauma of believing the lie and not reaching out. But that's where your quote comes in perfect. That help is for those who. Well, could you say that again? You said help is for those that are looking for it or need it.
Oh, help is for people who want it, not for people who need it.
Exactly, because needing it doesn't get it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So awareness is half the battle, it seems.
Yeah. And that's like, I know it's different bucking horses versus what we do, but that's like the same thing with horses, right? Like, you make it their idea, you make them want to do it, life's way easier. Just because that horse needs to act this way for whatever reason to do your job, they want to act that way. Golly, life's way better.
Yeah. For sure.
Well, I know I've got at least one more question for you. I wanted to ask you, especially since we already talked about it, what are you currently reading and studying right now?
Reading and studying right now?
Yeah.
I haven't picked up those books in a while. I'm not gonna. You just reminded me. I gotta pick them all back up. I mean, even the ones that I've already read, I gotta go back, and I don't think it hurts to reread stuff. Another one is, I guess I kind of touched on it. I haven't really delved into it far, but I've started to read it. Was that what the hell is it called? The Art of War.
Oh yeah, I love that book.
Was it Sun Tzu?
Sun Tzu, yep.
Yeah, and I think
that one's a pretty quick read too. You can read that like 3 times in a row.
Yeah, for sure. Like, he talks about the power of the sheathed sword. Not being able to achieve victory without war. You know what I mean? I don't know. That's one thing I took away from that in the short bit that I read.
I'll have to add that to my list. Is he the one that said it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a warrior, or a gardener in a war? Or did I just screw that up?
No, I
Something
know
like
that
it's
quote.
better to
I
be
don't think that's in the art. That might be in the
somebody
art of
else.
war.
It's
Yeah.
better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war. That's what it is.
Mhm.
That's right.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, either
Yeah.
way, I'll jot that down. It said The Art of War by Sun Tzu. Okay. Yeah, I always try to be on the lookout because we've been traveling a lot lately, so it's always a good time to pop a book in. Or I listen to a lot of. How do you read them, or do you listen to them, or do you have a Kindle or something like that?
I read them and I listen to them. Oh, another one too
Okay.
is Green Lights by Matthew McConaughey. I love that book.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You know, an interesting one I read recently, which I'll have to check that out now, is it was Arnold Schwarzenegger's autobiography called "Be Useful." I was in the bookstore with my wife, and I saw the book, and he's got his grizzled face. You know, it says "Be Useful." I'm like, oh, maybe that's cool. So I had some credits on what is it, Audible, and I bought it and read it, and there was some really good little nuggets in there. There's some goofy stuff too, but yeah, I'll have to check that one out too. Getting all the good. We'll have to start an on the move book club one of these days.
For sure.
Someday we'll have a big website full of recommended reading by all of our guests.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just wanted to ask you that because it's interesting. It's encouraging to hear what other people are up to and what they're studying. And I mean, not even having met you before, you've put a smile on my face a few times just watching your videos on Instagram. I get a real kick out of that, and your consistency with, you know, you say, hey, it's your favorite Indian here, and you are. I don't know many of them, but you're a good one, and it's always an encouraging message that you put out on there. And it's one of those things. I think you were saying this earlier. It's not always the information you receive. Like, it doesn't always help your life exactly, but listening to someone say something positive and give you a little bit of advice. This might have been Joe. He was just saying he likes hearing what people did, and it does. It makes you better. It takes you out of that poor headspace. And so often, like, life didn't change at all, but your mentality. So you're sitting there thinking about all the negative things, and all it takes is like one little Instagram reel of Dougie Hall or somebody else, whoever it is, coming on there and saying, hey guys, you know, this is what's going on today, or this is what I did, or this is how this worked out well. And all it takes is that one little video for you to flip your thinking and start thinking about all the good things. And most of the time, the good things are way more than the bad things that are going on at the time. And all it took was that little video. So I appreciate, you know, guys like you and everybody who does that, because it might seem trite to some people, but it does. It makes a difference. And it's a good thing. Put that out.
Thank you.
So that's my last question, because like even for this podcast, your email, I won't say your like exactly what your email is in case you don't want that blown up, but like, dude, like favorite Indian, that like when you sent me that, I had to look at it a couple times. I was like, oh, I get it. So where'd you come up with the like, hey everybody, it's your favorite Indian? Like, have you been saying that for a while, or like how'd you get that as kind of your hook?
Well, when I was in college, I don't know, like a lot of my friends in college, like they'd say, "Oh, Dougie, like you're my favorite Indian," you know, things like that. Or and I really started thinking about it. And there's actually a movie called Smoke Signals. You guys will have to watch it if you haven't already.
Okay.
It's there's a guy, there's a character on there. His name's Victor. And Victor, when he's a young kid, his dad. There's a scene where his dad's asking him, you know, who's your favorite Indian? Who's your favorite Indian? Like, and anyway, that movie's pretty famous in Indian country, so I kind of blended what my college friends were telling me and what that, you know, and that scene from that movie, and
Yeah.
that's where I came up with it.
Well, it's good, man. Like, people don't forget that. Like, I watched one video and I was like, you know, didn't know who you were really. You just came up in the algorithm, but I was like, 3 days later, I still remember that guy saying, "Hey, everybody, it's your favorite Indian." Like, that is a good hook. So you crushed it with that one.
Thank you. I appreciate
Absolutely.
it.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
one more quick question.
yeah,
Did
go
you
ahead.
work on Horizon? Speaking of movies.
Yeah, that's where I met Steven Yellowtail.
Oh, okay. Okay, and that's just coming out. I think it's just hit theaters like this week, right? Or the premiere at least?
Yeah, tomorrow. It comes out in theaters tomorrow.
Sweet. Good deal, man.
Yeah.
That's exciting. Was that
that's
your
the best
first film?
Indian movie now.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to cut you off.
What was Horizon your first film you worked on?
I worked on, I think, a smaller film back long time ago, but nothing to the scale of Horizon. Horizon was like my first really big movie like that, doing stunts and stuff. And I met Steven Yellowtail on there, and we've become pretty damn good friends, like brothers, you know. And
Yeah.
yeah, no,
Awesome.
it was a pretty cool experience.
Cool. That's awesome. Well, I'll have to go watch that now, because now that I know two guys that were actually part of that deal. No offense to Kevin Costner, but he's not enough to draw me. But if Dougie and Steven are there, I'll go watch.
Yeah.
Hell yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah, definitely.
So, yeah, man, I can't thank you enough for the time. This has been a really fun conversation, and it's Ben and I really appreciate everyone who comes on here, but it's cool to see folks that are like closer to our age that are being successful and have kind of done a lot for themselves. Because it does just, in the same way, like going and talk to those kids, you can see someone who's maybe in a similar situation. It's like, oh, this guy, he's an entrepreneur, and kind of at this stage of his life, and at least from the outside looking in, like, you're doing good. Things are growing. You seem to enjoy your life. You're passionate about what you do, and it just kind of like it inspires me to keep wanting to be like that. So it's been really fun getting to talk to you, and I appreciate you ducking out on your busy schedule to do this with us.
You bet. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate you guys.
Yeah. And so
Absolutely.
for anyone listening, if they want to look you up or like buy a hat from you, or which we didn't even really get to talk about the merch, but like your merch is fire, man. Like those hats, like the one you're wearing, that's sick. I love that hat. So if anyone wants to get some good medicine bucking horse stuff, or look you up on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, like, you want to plug all that so they know where to find you?
Yeah, you bet. So my Instagram is Dougie Fresh Hall. It's verified. My public Facebook page is Dancing Dougie Hall. There's a lot of fake ones out there, but mine's the one with like 90,000 followers on it. And my TikTok, I think, is just Dougie Hall. And it's got like, there's a lot of fake ones of those too, but it's got, my TikTok has like 200 and some thousand followers. And I got a YouTube also. And my website for my merchandise is goodmedicinebuckandhorses.com.
Awesome. And if somebody listens to this and wants you to come do a speaking event for them, what's the best way to get a hold of you for that?
Just go to my website, goodmedicinebuckandhorses.com, and go to wherever it is it says to contact me, and just send me a message on there.
Perfect. You bet.
Sounds good. All right. Dougie, good to meet you. Don't hang up yet. We're going to end this, but it's got to upload still.
All righty.
Thanks, man.
Thank you.